The exhibition 700 Years of Bonds, Unveiling the Journey of Italians in Myanmar is aimed at rediscovering the legacy of Italians in the Golden Land, and also to show the intricate fabric of dialogue and relationship exchanges that have been going on through centuries between the two countries. We say 700 centuries of history because the first Italian to come to Myanmar was Marco Polo. He arrived from Yunnan, traveling on a long journey when the city of Bagan had fallen into the hands of the Mongols. But despite that, and despite the war that had just been going on, he still in his records marvels about the beauty of Bagan and the gold shining pagoda that he had seen and that he thinks is one of the marvels of the world. After Marco Polo, Nicolò de' Conti was the next Italian traveler to visit Myanmar at the beginning of the 15th century. He made an extraordinary travel to the east and he went up to visit Ava, and he was probably the first Westerner to visit the city of Ava. Nicolò de' Conti explains that in traveling eastwards you meet three Indias. The first India, which is today Middle East, the second India, which is the current India, and the third India that starts with Myanmar and is Southeast Asia. And when he refers to the third India, he wants to point out how the third India is very similar to Europe in terms of civilization and custom and habits, and how for Europeans they can feel very close to the civilization of this part of the world. And this is very interesting because it's the farthest part he had reached, and yet he feels like being back at home. Other Italians that came to Myanmar in Renaissance time are Girolamo di Santo Stefano and Girolamo Adorno, who came to Myanmar at the end of the 15th century, as well as Ludovico da Vartema, who arrived across the 15th to 16th century. And they also left memories of their travels, and especially the beautiful Itinerario by Ludovico of Vartema, who explains in details the many aspects and facets of the culture of the kingdom of Pegu at that time, so the Hmong kingdom. And he explained also how he had a very successful meeting with the king of Pegu, and he had gifted the king of some precious corals from Venice, and the king in exchange has given him rubies of immense value to show him his generosity. The traveler of the Italian travelers of the Renaissance to Myanmar and to the east have heavily contributed to the cartographic skills of the West. And among the beautiful maps that were drawn thanks to their precise description of the places they had been traveling to, we can cite for Nicolò de' Conti the Cantino map of 1457, that is one of the first map of the world drawn in Europe, and for the later travels of Ludovico da Vartema, the Cantino map in the Biblioteca Estense, which is very interesting, not only because it shows pretty much in detail the coast of Myanmar and Tanitari, but also because it's the first map that has indication of longitude marked on it, improving very much navigation skills for future travels. The knowledge of Myanmar in the West, thanks to the travels of Italian travelers, have also enhanced the interest for the precious stones that were coming from Myanmar. And other traders successively tried to access Myanmar to trade the famous Myanmar rubies. And among them was a jeweler from Venice called Gaspare Baldi. who arrived in Pegu, as well as a merchant called Federici. They both arrived at the end of the 16th century. And what is also interesting is that Federici, who had many adventures, finally writes that Myanmar is a place where, with hard work and effort, and by being a honest trader, you can be successful even if you start with small capital, meaning that trade customs and loyalty were values that at that time allowed for him to feel very much at ease while being here. The first stable presence in Myanmar of Italian missionaries is attributed to the Barnabite order, the order of St. Paul, that arrived at the beginning of the 18th century and settled in Syriam, the current Tanlin. And the order sent over 30 missionaries across almost 100 years of activities in a very turbulent moment of Myanmar history, and a very dangerous one. But despite this, they have been successful in establishing churches, and especially in bringing back to Europe and to the Vatican a deeper knowledge about the Myanmar culture. What is extremely interesting about the Barnabites is that since the first missionary that arrived, Sigismondo Calchi, they tried to codify the Burmese language, and they tried to make dictionaries between Burmese and Latin. And finally, in 1776, the first printed book in Myanmar alphabet was printed in the Vatican, thanks to their work. And the first dictionary between Latin and Myanmar, and the first book in which the Myanmar characters were typographically produced in order to print book. So this is a historical achievement in terms of codifying the Burmese language and making it available for printed books. After the Barnabites missionary relinquished their mandate, the Vatican decided to entrust another missionary order of the task of being active in Myanmar. And the choice fell on the Piemontese Oblate, a small order recently created in Torino. And the extraordinary thing is that this small order had massively sent missionary in Myanmar from 1836 onwards. And among the many missionaries that were sent was Father Abona. Father Abona was a very remarkable character. He was not only a priest, but he was a humanist. He was a man who deeply connected with the local culture of Myanmar, and he became an absolute confidant of King Mindon. King Mindon entrusted him with the task of negotiating the difficult ceasefire with the British during the Second Anglo-Burmese War, and Father Abona gained even more the trust and confidence of the sovereign. And being from Piemonte, he was in connection with the court of Torino. At that time, Italy was not unified, and Piemonte Sardinia was one of the kingdoms of Italy. And it was under the leadership of a very brilliant Prime Minister, Cavour, who was later the unifier of Italy. And Cavour saw a potential for developing diplomatic relations between the Burmese Empire and the Kingdom of Piemonte Sardinia. So he started exchanging gifts and missions between the two countries. Cavour sent, among other things, also vines that started growing in Mandalay and in Ava, and negotiated through Father Abona a treaty of friendship that unfortunately was not concluded because of the opposition of the British. But it laid down the basis for the further negotiation once Italy was unified, and therefore the contacts were resumed, and the treaty finally, in 1871 was signed between the two countries, Italy and Myanmar. The extraordinary thing about the treaty is that in colonial times it was a starking contrast, being an equal treaty, and every clause of the treaty were foreseeing mutual rights for both countries in terms of access, trading, possibility to settle in the other country. And the treaty also envisaged this very interesting cooperation in fostering the presence of technicians alongside the modernization efforts of King Mindon in Burma, and laid down the basis for the presence of Italians in Mandalay in the last phase of the Burmese Empire. But contacts were going both ways, and Myanmar was also sending ambassadors and representatives to Italy, and among them most prominent was Kinwu Mingi, who traveled to Italy in 1872, as well as in France and the UK, and left a diary and memories of his stay in Italy. And it's very interesting because he had seen the potential of the newly unified Italy, and had made an interesting comparison with the potential for developing Myanmar as well. After Kinwu Mingi, other ambassador came, and we have photographic portraits of them being made in Italy. And we also have a very last image which is striking. It's an image from an Italian newspaper of that time of King Umberto I receiving the Burmese envoys, and this mission took place in 1885, so it was really few months before the loss of independence of Myanmar. At that time, the navy presence of Italy was also very important, because the Italian commercial fleet was among the most important in trading goods with Myanmar, both with the English part of Burma, but also with Upper Myanmar, which was still independent. And over 100 Italian merchant ships would dock in Yangon, mainly to export rice to Europe. For the same reason, Italy had also a naval diplomacy towards Myanmar at that time, with many vessels of the Italian Royal Navy docking in Yangon and showing the flag, as was said in those times, to protect the commercial interest of Italy and to try to ensure that commerce with Upper Burma would not be hampered. Leonardo Fea is one of the less known but very important Italians that spent time in Myanmar. He was an artist, but he was also a naturalist, and he embarked in a very perilous mission to explore the fauna of Myanmar between 1885 and 1889, meaning in years in which major political events were happening and a lot of instability was around. And despite that, he traveled extensively, first to Kachin, then to Shan, Kaya, Kayin, and Tanintari. And he has collected 80,000 different specimens of Myanmar flora and fauna, and incredibly 2,000 new species unknown to science. So the legacy of Leonardo Fea is to have really contributed to the knowledge of the biodiversity of Myanmar in very ancient times. And he also left a beautiful book about his experience, in which there are also a lot of records about the custom and habits of the different population he had met along his travels. When in 1871 the Treaty of Friendship was signed between Italy and Burmese Empire, Italy appointed Mr. Giovanni Andreino as its consul to Mandalay and opened a full-fledged consulate in the city. Consul Andreino was chosen because he was a very skilled trader and spoke fluently Burmese and had excellent contacts with the royal court. He was a man of many talents, but he was also an extremely ambitious man, and his legacy is somehow still discussed because apart from being the consul of Italy, he was also the representative of some of the major British companies active in Upper Burma. And when in 1885 the situation started to deteriorate dramatically, and there was a French mission to Mandalay to sign a defensive treaty between the Burmese Empire and France, he warned his superiors in the British companies, and that triggered the British reaction that led to the ultimatum to King Thibault and finally annexation. So, despite having served for many years as a consul, his legacy is somehow tainted by the final actions in his career. He was, however, one of the most important and prominent Italians at that time active in Myanmar. This was the beautiful Italian consulate in Mandalay from 1871 to 1885. A pretty impressive building. Unfortunately, we have no records of the precise address, and we haven't been able to locate it on a map. This might be object for some further researches. Andreino, of course, was not the only Italian present in Mandalay at that time. A flock of technicians came to support the modernization of the Burmese Empire. And among them we had people like Mr. Canepa, who ran the Royal Silk Factory, making it one of the most important industrial endeavors of the Burmese Empire, with 1,500 spindles working together to produce the beautiful achek that are still known today for their refinement. And as well, other Italians were present and marked the history of that moment. Among them we had Dr. Luigi Barbieri, who was the personal doctor of King Thibault and who was very much loved by the king and by the court. And you had also a number of other technicians in different fields, chemists, professionals, as well as military instructors. And all this community was peaking to 200 people and was the largest foreign European community present in Mandalay before the annexation. I particularly like this photo of Mr. Canepa and his son. Mr. Canepa was the director of the silk factory, and definitely he was very, very proud of his achek. And I think it's the only Westerner of that time that you would see wearing a lodge. Among the Italians present in Myanmar at that time, the military instructor played an important role, not only because they participate to the campaigns against the rebel Shan princess, but also because they left a lot of material behind them in terms of book, in terms of records for the Italian geographical societies, and actually they were the one that documented better this unique moment in time in which Myanmar under King Mindon and successively King Thibault tried to speed up its modernization and to open to the world in a different way. And they are men in between worlds, but what is interesting is that despite being part of the of a time where the colonial divide was still very important. They left a lot of positive notes about Myanmar, and especially one that marked me because I see it also today in everyday life, about the generosity of Myanmar people. After British annexation in 1885, most of the Italians left Myanmar. However, a very intriguing character arrived just afterwards in 1886 is Mr. Felice Beato, a professional photographer who had extensively traveled along the Asian routes and along British colonization of Asia. And finally he settled in Japan for 20 years, but when Mandalay fell to the British, he decided to set up his new studio in Mandalay. And he has extensively recorded Mandalay of its time, and his beautiful photos, which were very much sought after, have also inspired an image of Myanmar in Europe and in the West, which still somehow persists today in terms of beauty and fascination. In 1868, the newly formed Pontificio Istituto Missioni Estere, so the Italian National Missionaries Institute, decided to send missionaries to the east of Myanmar, which was at that time a very remote area populated prevailingly by animist population. So the Pime missionaries gradually arrived in Taungu, and then from there moved eastwards along the Salween River, contributing not only to their missionary mandate, but especially in supporting and being close to the population in terms of their immediate needs, schooling, instruction, hospitals, and left a very profound mark with some extraordinary characters that are still today remembered in, especially in Kaya and in Shan. I would like to recall Father Vismara, which was one of the last one to die in Myanmar, and Father Vismara was an exceptional person. He was called the priest that always laughed, because he was so in love with life and with the possibility to help others that he was always in good mood, even when his material conditions were really tough. And I especially like this sentence that he left, where he say, "Here in Monglin, I live without a home, I get up without an alarm clock, I wash myself without a basin, I pray without a church, I eat without a table clock, I hunt without a license, I travel without money, I cheat without guilt, I work without rest, I walk without shoes, I am cheerful without theater, I study languages endlessly, I don't spend a day without annoyances, I live with friends, I feed faulty rascals without scruples, I grow old without realizing it, and I will certainly die without remorse, because heaven helps me to be a cheerful man." Religious contacts between Italy and Myanmar have not gone only one way in terms of missionary Catholic presence. We have also the extraordinary story of Salvatore Cioffi, later known as Locanata, a man that was born near Naples and emigrated to the United States, where he fortuitously found a copy of the Dhammapada and got totally enlightened by his reading and became a Buddhist, and then decided to transfer to India, Sri Lanka, and finally Myanmar, where he has been very much revered for his absolute Buddhist faith and for his very incredible strength of character. He influenced also the very young Bojo Aung San, and later on he was in correspondence with Dr. Ambedkar, the leader of the Indian Untouchables and one of the fathers of independent India, convincing him to declare the mass conversion to Buddhism of the Indian Untouchables. And after the war, where he was interned in a British camp in India, he came back to Myanmar, and from Myanmar he decided to raise awareness about Buddhism throughout the world, and especially in America. So he is one of the, I would say, of the fathers of the new Buddhist wave in the West and of the interest of the West to Buddhism, and left a very profound mark. And when he died in 1966, his funeral, his state funeral at Shwedagon was attended by an incredible amount of Myanmar people. Hundreds of thousands paid tribute to him.